So if you've ever had a job, you probably have had a challenge with your leader. Today, we're going to talk about knowing your leader's heart. Does that work?
I mean, it was fairly awful, but, I mean, it'll stick.
Cool.
Yep, let's go with it.
Fine with me. If I get a thumbs up in any sort of up direction, I'm going for it.
That's good enough to
counts.
go. Good enough to go.
Cool. The Lord will cover the rest. He's well pleased. That's it.
He is indeed. Fair enough. Yeah, that was good, bud.
Cool.
I liked it.
You are watching the Beyond Sunday podcast.
So thanks for joining us today. We're going to talk about how to know your leader's heart better. No matter if you work in a church or at a school, or it doesn't matter where, we all serve different leaders.
Yep.
And that in and of itself poses challenges at times.
Just a bit.
So the reality is work is busy. Work is stressful. And sometimes your boss is in a mood. Sometimes
really?
You're in a mood.
Well, that's true. Or drink smoky tea, as my team points out.
Or some of, mainly just him, only him, drinks a tea that nobody likes.
Wow, harsh. This is Lap saying souchong, by the way. It's very good, but they hate on it a lot.
Smells like brisket. So that's an issue for most of us, but...
Fair enough.
But
all right, you were talking about leaders, I thought. Yeah, at some point.
And the challenges thereof.
Yeah.
But at some point, conflict happens. So how do we begin to establish a healthy relationship to better know your leader's heart?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the first things that we can do, and this is a hard lesson that I had to learn, was the idea that you need to spend time with them. Especially, for me, from my experience, when your leader's in that mood, as you said, when those challenges are happening, it's kind of the last thing I want to do is spend time with you.
Sure.
A little absence makes a heart grow fonder, is what I'm hoping for. But in all seriousness, as I've experienced through that, when you start separating and you just think, I just need to get away, kind of do my own thing. And when I begin to move through that, then it seems like, this will make it better. But actually, it's that one-on-one time, spending time together, that I think starts making the difference.
Yeah, it kind of starts to refuel and at some level remind you why you're such a fan of this person or why you really care for a certain person.
Right.
And it's interesting. I was thinking about this in preparation for this topic.
Right.
That sometimes there are times when I feel disconnected.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think that if we were really honest and we knew the feelings of our leader, which we don't always.
No.
But chances are, if we are feeling disconnected, likely we've already been in the position where we've kind of pulled away because it's like, goodness, I need some space.
Right.
And so we kind of disconnect. Then we begin to feel the tension of disconnecting. And I think that our leaders have experienced that maybe even before, because in some ways they kind of feel like they're on an island a little bit. They're carrying a different burden than we are. And so the disconnection is a real feeling. And when things are good, they're good. But when they're bad,
it can be rough.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I think, maybe if we're honest and we kind of unpack it back a little further, when we start feeling a little frustrated, maybe there's a chance that at the time that we feel that separation, that disconnect, or we feel that tension, there's probably every likelihood the leader already felt it beforehand.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe that's where there's some worry on their part. Hey, I'm not sure things are getting done. Do you get the vision that I'm throwing? Some of those kinds of things that they're already feeling that. And so they're pushing, which causes us some tension. We begin to disconnect. And the more disconnected we are, the more there's a gap between the two of us. Yeah. And I think that can be pretty hurtful.
And the thing that we think is going to solve the issue creates more issue.
Right. Yeah, being apart from you will help us have better understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not going to work. And I think one of the worst things that we can do, I think you were kind of leaning in towards that, is that, I've got what's going on inside of me, and then because we're not together, I projecting some of what's going on in my mind onto this is what's going on inside of you without finding out,
right?
Without asking. So, yeah, I think that's maybe one of the first steps forward. Then, besides setting up that one-on-one time, is that idea of rehumanizing that person.
Yeah.
They're not just an object. They're not just hey, you're the force that's opposing me. Who are you? I apparently liked you at one point. I agreed to work with you. I think. I hope. I think that's right.
Hope so.
Yeah, I hope so. Hopefully you didn't, interview with somebody and go, this guy's a royal jerk. Yeah, I'll go ahead and take the job. It seems like you're making poor choices, actually.
A little bit, what's coming at that point.
Yeah, the only person to blame is you. If that was your first decision, this relationship was probably on the rocks, and this is probably your fault.
I can only control my actions.
I can only control my actions. That's what they call a callback, everybody. You weren't here for that, so never mind. But yeah, I think that's the idea, is that we have to realize that we're not just two forces with competing differences. I think slowing down and going, okay, hang on a second. Why is it you think that way?
Mm-hmm.
Why were you pushing? Why were you kind of setting a deadline, or, maybe giving some pretty critical feedback that I didn't like.
Yeah.
I didn't enjoy that. But trying to think why. I mean, you're a person. You've got needs, you've got fears, you've got worries. What were all those things? And I think if we start trying to approach that instead of going, hey, here's how I felt about this and I was upset. Well, what was going on your side? And not putting things on you, but trying to search that out and go, man, I wonder what's going on with you.
Yeah, I think that's super good. Humanizing your leader, because at times we feel our fleshiness.
Everybody.
We feel our fleshiness, and we know we're human. But sometimes, I know I've been guilty of this. I kind of look at my leader sometimes as a machine.
Right.
Man, he's just going and he's productive and he's charging through. But he's got skin too.
True.
And he feels all the same things.
No, he doesn't have skin. He's the embodiment of all the best leadership books I've ever read, right?
A carbon fiber type thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's just indestructible.
I read these principles from John Maxwell. These are all good. And he has to embody those. Now, the people I lead, I'm kind of fleshy, so have some mercy and grace. But, dude, you're supposed to be better than me.
Yeah. Yeah, we kind of... It's almost like we might elevate people to a level that's unreachable in order to make ourselves feel better for the issues that we deal with. And sometimes we think of people, and not always, but I think we can think of people on such a high level like, well, he's in charge. He should know better.
Yeah. I've heard that one inside of myself before. Yeah, that's fair.
And I don't think it works like that.
Right.
We all are going to make mistakes. We're going to do boneheaded things.
Right.
And the challenge of navigating with anybody, but for today's topic, a leader is it's important to remember that they're human and they feel things too.
Yeah. You just said something that, in confessing to you guys here, that that idea is like they should know better. They should do better. I've actually... found myself at points where you're sitting there going, well, they should know better. So why do I have to try that hard? I'm going to sandbag a little bit because, if you're going to get away with stuff and not do the very best, most perfect job ever, and it's personally hitting me in a space today, I'm just going to sandbag a little bit too. And that's never going to get into a good place. I can't imagine that we're going to bridge our gap now because I'm doing less for you and I'm doing less than my very best, actually.
Yeah,
so.
Like waking up and deciding I'm going to drag my feet a little bit today.
Right.
Because, I feel like somebody else is, they're doing worse than me, so I can just slow down a little bit. Yeah, that's a horrible position to be in.
Right.
But, in humanizing your leader, it is so helpful to remember that they have hurts, feelings, past experiences, and just like us in every way, blind spots.
Yep.
And so it's so much easier for us to identify other people's blind spots, but it's called a blind spot because we don't see it ourselves.
Right.
And so it's super, super important how we handle me understanding your blind spots or my leader's blind spots and vice versa, because we see it in each other.
Yep.
But, we kind of have to navigate that well because sometimes sometimes unknowingly, but sometimes on purpose, just because we're feeling a little salty,
right?
We can step in some areas that create conflict, and a little bit, maybe we wanted to, because you just wanted to.
Yeah.
But I think it's a real thing. At least it has been for me at times.
Sure. And I can feel that. I have to admit there have been times that for me, as as a leader, you're trying to move. You're putting forth effort. Blind spots are there. I can't see my own yet, but I'm trying to put forth effort. And since I'm putting in effort, what I do is I start stepping into judgment, if I'm honest, and that's always a bad step forward. But I start stepping in judgment because, hey, I'm trying really hard, and I'm judging myself, so I'm going to put you to a higher standard than even I'm at. And like you said, I'm ignoring the fact that you're human. You could have had a bad day. You're under pressure. Hey, I'm under pressure right now. Forget whatever you're feeling. I've got issues right now. You're supposed to be past all of your issues because I've got things I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
And I think that's unfair to put on a leader. But, like you were talking about, humanizing, and we're talking in general about, kind of knowing your leader's heart. One of the steps, forward is, okay, so I'm supposed to know my leader's heart. How? And I think one of the first things that we can do is ask good questions.
Oh, yeah.
And, so as we ask good questions, I think it's important that we don't assume things. We were talking, putting things on your leader, trying to know what's going on in their mind and things like that. I think if we start by just saying, hey, tell me what's going on, or they come up with something that they want done, hey, explain a little bit to me. One of the things I was thinking about earlier today as I was preparing for today was just this idea that a lot of times we get a directive, let's say, from a leader, and when we get that, we'll just have a response to it. I'm frustrated with what you said. And, that may be that point where I start pulling away. Right. But in that moment, instead of just going, or trying to get something done based on my understanding, stop and go, hey, can I ask you some questions about that?
Yep.
And hear their heart. Is this something important to them? Is this something that's been bothering them for a while? And just start asking those good questions, not assuming. And I think it's a great place to start, at least.
Yeah, and especially if you have a desire to do good by your leader, and sincerely inside of my heart, I always want to do a good job for whoever I'm serving. I want to work hard. I want to be able to achieve things. And honestly, I want to be able to meet the expectations of my leader, of what they're asking.
Sure.
Sometimes I have bad days, and I'm like,
fair.
Maybe I don't want to today.
Right.
But in my heart, I really want to meet the needs and the expectations and asks of my leader. But sometimes there's, due to misinformation or lack of really seeking out good questions, sometimes we can spin our wheels in directions that are not helpful. But knowing and going back to kind of the heartbeat of our leader, and we, again, get that from spending time with them, asking great questions about how do you feel about this? What do you really want to accomplish with this? Vision is huge.
Right.
And I know as a church team, we talk tons about vision.
Right.
Without a vision, it's impossible to go and move forward together.
Right.
So no matter what organization, and it may not always be very inspiring, but most organizations have a vision.
Right. Yeah.
And it's very helpful to go back to that, to understand at times, I know this is my leader's goal. This is what they want. They're trying to fulfill this, and they're fleshy. And so they're going to have bad days just like we are. Yeah. But
I think that vision piece is important. I think in kind of two levels, if you will, playing a little loose with the idea of vision, there is the vision. And that's where we're going. Everything, hopefully, with our leader, there is that vision, especially if they're the leader who put it down. It was in their heart and mind at one point. That's where they really want to see us go. And so everything should be, at some ways, pointing towards that. But then there's kind of, if you will, kind of the micro vision. What's the vision for this thing? Yeah. Now, this thing should add up to the main vision, but what's the vision for this thing? And if we don't, we talk around here a lot about just sideways energy. That if I don't come into alignment, if I don't have that understanding, because I haven't asked the good questions, I could create sideways energy. Yeah. And now the whole organization, instead of moving forward, is strained. that's going to put more tension on the leader and a bigger divide now.
And it creates frustration.
Oh, tons, yeah.
Why are you doing that? That doesn't make any sense.
Right.
It's like, I just did it. But yeah,
I just did the thing.
All of it would have been solved if I would have sought out better questions.
Right.
And asked why questions.
Right.
Or what are you looking for type thing.
Right.
And I think also a super, super important piece of the puzzle is personalities interact so differently with each other. Right. And so most people are maybe aware of like the Enneagram numbers.
Okay,
and so there's a ton of helpful tools in better understanding
it's a good tool.
Everybody's, your whole team's personality traits, the way they're wired, the way that they are best communicated to. And so it's super helpful in understanding what things, not like it's a ticking time bomb if you say the wrong thing always, but there are better ways to approach certain people. And if you know their blind spots, if you know what isn't going to create a good foot forward in a conversation where you're trying to seek answers or ask questions, then we can again create more conflict. Right. So it really helps to know your personality, but also theirs, whoever you're communicating with. Yeah. But
that's a huge level of kind of humanization, like you were talking about before, because when you think about that, for me at least, I know kind of how I'm wired. I know my personality type, using kind of the Enneagram model, and there's a lot of different ones, but that's, one that is a pretty good tool that we've liked. But as we end up looking at that, understanding what our leader's type is, and walking with that, hearing some of those things, you go, I can hear some of these responses, these personality traits kind of coming out, and it gives me a lens, at least a tool to, rather than try and look at it from my perspective, that doesn't line up. Because through my speaker, my lens, that would mean this. Well, but he's not me. What's that mean from his side? And so I think, one of the things that, looking back on one of our previous conversations, to me, this reminds me a lot of when we were talking about love, and we were having those conversations about kind of that agape. There is this weird vulnerability that we're asking people to do. Yeah. It's like, hey, I'm asking you to be very giving, be gracious towards your leader.
Yeah.
Send out and go, hey, I'm trying to understand some stuff. I'm trying to meet you and stuff and everything else. So this could be really risky.
Yeah.
And so tell me in your mind, what could be some of the risks that you could face? Because I'm sure for folks that are going, okay, I'm supposed to support my leader, know his heart. Haven't heard anything from me on my end yet. So sounds a little risky. Let's be honest. What are some of the risks we could face?
Yeah. And I'll just say there's probably a lot of people watching this that might go, well, you don't know my boss. You don't know what I have to deal with. And part of the reality is some leaders aren't worth following.
Oof. Ouch.
And that may not be, I would hope not super common, but I mean,
but it is true. I think that's honest.
There are some leaders that really just aren't worth following.
Right.
And part of the challenge is if you're leading people poorly, you'll create rotating doors of people. And so
I've seen it.
I mean, in a very literal way, some of the potential risk is you might get your head bit off a little bit.
Right.
Even at times, a leader, granted, probably not worth following again.
Okay.
But I mean, you could lose your job if they feel like you're nosing in a little bit too hard. And I would maybe say that the approach might be a little strong if trying to understand somebody better leads to you losing their job. There's probably a lot more of a dynamic going on.
Yeah, there's other things at play at that point.
But the risk is that it could be misinterpreted. It could create challenge. It could create, in some ways, again, if not handled with humility, a spirit of competition in your team.
Right.
Because what do we equate somebody who's nosing up to the leader?
All right. Not good.
Yeah, you start making assumptions. Again, if you have watched our other episodes, that's not healthy, and we're casting judgment, but that is a thing that is a risk that we can face by doing that.
Well, and I think another risk that's come to my mind, something I've experienced before, and something I had to navigate through, is that you get this sense that, okay, I'm going to accept this challenge, I'm going to try real hard, and I'm going to put in some effort. And again, thinking, not seeing my own blind spots, I see myself growing. I'm putting in effort. Meet me halfway at least, bro. And you feel like they're not putting in the same effort.
Yeah.
And I think that can feel like a risk because I think you can start getting this idea, this fatigue that comes over you because you feel like, man, I'm pulling this whole working relationship on my own and you're not. And that's not fair. You don't know what's going on in their mind.
Yeah.
And that actually reminds me of a training we had years ago as a staff that was talking about there's a gap. There's a place where we don't know everything.
Yeah.
Hey, I don't know what's going on in your mind. There's a missing piece. And in the training, it was said that, in every gap that you have, you can fill it with one of two things, either trust or suspicion.
Yep.
And I think that's a huge key, that when we step into that moment, there's that time of risk that you look at, well, what am I going to pour into this? I could have suspicion, hey, you're not pulling your weight either.
Mm-hmm.
Or I could put in trust and go, you're doing the very best that you can as well. And I'm just going to, in our case, we're going to trust that, God's working on you, same as he's working on me, and that, I'm going to hope for the very best in this.
Which even that can feel like a risk.
Oh, yeah.
Being trusting of somebody else,
right,
in a moment where naturally you kind of think in your head, I don't know.
Right.
That feels risky because what if you trust them and they really are being lazy? Or something like that.
Yeah, you don't hope that doesn't work out that way, but yeah.
But it would hit you in the feels a little bit when you feel like you're pulling weight that nobody else is.
Right.
And so there is actually quite a bit of potential risk in pressing into some of these areas. Knowing that can happen, why is it still worth it?
Yeah, and I think that's the important question. I've got all the risk. You're asking me to do something bigger. I've got to own deeper leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, why is this risk worth it? And
is it?
Yeah, is it? That's first. And I'd say yes. I think, I don't know, scripture just popped in my head, as far as it is up to you, live at peace with everyone. It's not saying you're going to live at peace with everyone, but as far as it is up to you.
Yeah.
And, I think, even if it is just you're the only one pulling the weight, you're the only one trying, it's probably a better environment already. It's not what you want, but hasn't it gotten better already? And so I think that's at least in one situation where it's at least somewhat worth it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think it's totally worth it because, again, little by little, I can only control my actions moving forward.
Right.
Do I want to begin taking steps toward healthier or not?
Yep.
And it sure feels like that's really the only two options.
Right.
I'm either going to make a conscious effort and decision to work forward and believe the best in my leader,
right,
and press in towards that, and I'll take on the risk.
Mm-hmm.
The risk probably is not going to be worse than the current reality at that point.
Yeah, I really doubt that.
And so, but the potential is so much greater.
Yeah.
There's so much more, and we've talked about this a lot as a team here around the church. There's so much more that we can experience.
Oh, yeah. This is good, but there's more. Yeah.
Yeah. But most days we walk around and we're pretty peachy about the team we get to work with.
Yes, no doubt.
However, there's a lot of intentional conversations that have led to the point where we get to experience this sort of environment and culture as a team.
Right.
And it's because we pushed into some of those risky areas or what felt like risky areas. Right. And so the truth is supporting your leader can be incredibly difficult depending on who it is or what the challenge might be, but it is so worth it. And there's enough that's so much better on the horizon if we continue to press into this that I think it gives us the ability to show who Christ is through us as we favor one another, as we trust versus be suspicious of our team members or our leaders. And so I think it's worth it. And so I encourage you to tune back in and join us for more episodes as we continue to dive into these topics. But for now, that's what we got.
See you.
This has been another episode of the Beyond Sunday podcast. And don't forget, like, share, and subscribe.